Hey everybody, Ben here from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios, and welcome back to the Elements of Design Part 4. This is the final part in this series, and we're talking about the two remaining elements, color and space. Now in our previous video we talked about value, and until you understand value, you can't really talk about color all that much. So if you haven't seen Part 3 of this series, go check that out here. And if you want to know a little bit more in color theory and painting, check out my color and values tutorial over here. So if you're still here, let's talk a little bit about the basics of color. Now regardless of your skill level, it is important to understand some basics about color. Primarily your warm colors and your cool colors, as well as your complementary or opposite colors. There's also things like hue, which is the pureness of a color, as well as value, light versus dark. There's also color intensity, which has to do with the contrast of that color. It's important to note though that intensity is actually not color value, it instead is about color contrast and the intensity of the hue. A higher intensity color has a brighter, more intense, sort of pure color look to it, and a lower intensity color seems more washed out. If you have Photoshop or another image editor, you can play around with this on your own time, just playing with the different slider bars and see what different contrast and intensity does for a color. And aside from color, we finally have space. Looking at the other elements of design, space builds and creates something on top of those. In space, you first want to think about the size of the object. Granted, I talked about this a little bit in my 0-point perspective video, in which I talk about how the size of an object further or closer from the horizon line will have different sizes and create the perception of depth. Thinking a little bit more simply, let's take a look at cartoons. In cartoons, you may not have the same value as you do in a realism drawing, but what you are going to find is overlapping shapes. In a situation with maybe not a lot of lighting or shadows, overlapping shapes will create the illusion of space. It's also important to understand the difference between positive and negative space. In this example, I'm using a jar of paint to act as my positive space, while negative space is really the area and empty space and air around an object. For the given example, I'm shading that negative space in with brown. Doing negative space drawings can be really great to start understanding the idea of space in a particular piece. Our next concept of space has to do with atmospheric perspective. A great way to think about atmospheric perspective is to think about mountains. When a mountain is far and distant, way out to the back of the horizon, it's going to be sort of less color intensity and a little bit lighter in value. Also due to the atmosphere in atmospheric perspective, you'll often see a slight color shift or change in hue as the mountains sort of go to the back. A lot of times you're thinking of something like a off blue or maybe even a little bit of a purple as well. And in addition to the difference in color and value, you're also going to see a little bit less detail the further back you go. Finally, we come full circle right back around to perspective. The use of line, shape, and form build the overarching architecture to your environment. Then you use 0-point perspective and up, along with some atmospherics, to really build a believable depth. Now we've covered a few things here today, so let's take a quick review. Basic color theory is very important for understanding atmospherics as well as the values in a given space. For a slightly more in-depth understanding of color theory and color values, check out my color theory and color values video over here, or click the link in the description box below. When it comes to space, it's important to understand the other elements of design and play before you sort of start building the scene. And as always, for more tips, tutorials, and other art videos, this has been from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios. Subscribe to the channel for more, and see you guys next time. Doing a drawing based simply on the negative space in a drawing based simply on the negative space in a draw. You suck.